Take your seat, settle in, and listen up. Gophers 101 is underway and in session. It's time to go to class and talk all things Gophers.
Well, Thor, all your Gophers do is win Big Ten football games at home. The evidence is pretty clear. Beat Rutgers at home, beat Purdue at home, thoroughly dismantle and handle Nebraska at home. And I also believe, I know I was in attendance for 3 of those games. I think you were in attendance for at least 2 of them.
Yep.
So dare I say that Gophers need to be dragging us on the road with them. And it starts for me this weekend, as I will attempt to help the Gophers bring back Floyd of Rosedale. How are you doing, my man?
Oh, you're headed to Iowa City?
Yeah, I've been to Iowa City. Okay. I think this will be time number 4. I was not fortunate enough to be there when they won 2 years ago, but I think this is time number 4, might even be time number 5. I love it. And by and large, the Iowegians treat us well. I've never really had many issues, and I travel to a lot of different games. My comeback anytime a fan base comes at you, Thor, is to just politely tell them sternly but loudly, I'm stimulating your economy.
For sure. Yeah, it's a friendly group down there. For those that don't know, I went to grad school at Iowa. Spent many fall Saturdays tailgating outside of Kinnick Stadium. But yeah, that should be a good time down there. They have very underrated tailgating in Iowa City around Kinnick. It's never brought up as one of the better tailgating spots, but for 11 a.m. games, it's pretty epic. Like, people are down there at 5 a.m. But yeah, it's just an area where they love football and they're obsessed with the Hawkeyes because there ain't another show in town. So it's but in Saturday becomes really interesting, right? I mean, Iowa, that's a good team, and the Gophers are making a strong argument, in particular on Friday night, that they are a good team. I was stunned with the domination of that game. You know, the first half they kind of controlled it, but obviously it was close. But in the second half coming out there, it was just utter demolition. Like, to begin, there wasn't any scoring there at the beginning of the third quarter, but it felt as though the Gophers had control of that thing. And then it was just points and points and points there. And the third quarter going into the fourth, you just kind of bury them. It was 17-0 after halftime. And the way that the Gopher defense rendered that Nebraska offense that can be dangerous, we have seen it be dangerous, just rendered it totally feeble. Was incredible. Like, at the end of that game, Raiola, who, he thinks he's Pat Mahomes, he's definitely going to get drafted. Raiola, very, very talented kid. That was your old fashioned ghost in the pocket, seeing the ghosts out there. And we had more than ghosts out there. We had marauders, because it made sense, because there was heat in his face. The play there in the fourth quarter where they rushed 3 and both of the defensive ends got there immediately anyway, sort of encapsulated the day. The Gophers defense carried the day, and the pass rush in particular with the 9 sacks, but incredible performance by the Gophers on Friday night.
That sack, why am I blanking on the name? It wasn't Carter Mins. It was, I feel bad that I'm blanking on the name.
They had so many sacks. Yeah,
there were 9 of them.
Yeah.
The kid who blew up the running back and then sacked Raiola for probably sack 6 or 7 in the game. Do you remember the sack that I'm talking about?
Yeah, I like the term sackled, by the way. We should bring that into the lexicon.
At some point, when you have so many sacks, it turns into a sackled, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, it was awesome. And I'll be honest, it was unexpected for me, not because, first off, I talked about this with Manny on Sunday. And we all do this. We're all in our own echo chamber of fandom and fan bases. But I just thought, Adam Carricker, by the way, I love his podcast, but he also went with the Gophers just are not as talented as Nebraska. And my comeback to that would be, okay, maybe on the surface, when you look at recruiting rankings, they're not as talented, but you've lost to them 6 times in a row and 6 times in the last 7 years. So I think the less talented thing kind of goes out the window there. I was just more surprised from the standpoint of we'd watched that defense get absolutely decimated for 3 or 4 straight weeks. So to be able to stand up the way that they did was awfully impressive. And Thor, we said, They will have to stop the run. They did a pretty good job of that. Not only would they have to stop the run, they'd have to run the ball on their own. Yeah, Darius Taylor with his 70-yard plus run that was almost a touchdown, that skews it a little bit. But the running backs were still largely able to get 3 to 5 yards at a time, which is crucially important to the way the Minnesota Golden Gophers want to run their offense. So that's why I say it was unexpected. I've told you for half the year, I don't understand why the defense is struggling so much. We know they have good players. So if they play like that, yeah, I think there's still an upside here that this team can win 8 or so games. One thing we did talk about, Thor, and I think it did come to fruition, I kind of thought maybe it was a pie in the sky theory, but I absolutely believed it played a part in the victory. Nebraska just looked disinterested and not ready to play, and give the Gophers credit for doing what they did, but a part of me believes some of that had to be the Matt Rule situation of really not getting out in front of the Penn State stuff in the week prior. Again, all credit to the Gophers, absolutely dominating, but it just felt like Penn State, geez, now I'm not in my right mind. It just felt like Nebraska was not ready to play.
100%. There seemed to be a lethargy with the players, the Nebraska players on the field. And, you know, I don't know if that's attributable to distraction or annoyance or whatever it was, but I did feel that being in the building. And then probably more to the point, I thought it was a really poorly thought out game plan by Nebraska. One that didn't make logical sense to me on the surface. When you know that you have the offensive line that Nebraska does, and you look at the beyond the numbers of you get into the analytics of the Gopher pass defense or their defense overall, there was a path here, I think, for Nebraska to have more offensive success, and I think it was pretty obvious, which is get the ball out faster, throw it quick, the quick game. We talked about this with regards to the Vikings, but the deep drops for Raiola there in that scenario when your offensive line is imploding, you did not put Raiola in a very good situation there. He didn't play the best himself. He had a couple cool plays, but he was under duress the whole game. If I was them, again, you look at the profile of the Gopher defense, you can attack them with the shorter passes, and the quick hitting concepts would have worked around your offensive line issues as well. Of course, it's easier said than done. But the thing I would not have done is go into that one and be like, yeah, we're going to win this game on deep Raiola drops the entire time. The strength of the Gopher defense is when you're throwing downfield. That's when you bring Coy and those guys into the 4, and you are susceptible now to getting the field flipped or whatever. I thought the Gophers were going to have to turn Raiola over at least once and perhaps multiple times to win this game. Turns out they didn't. However, it was the 9 sacks that were standing in for. They essentially turned over several of these possessions just by the deep sacks that they ended up taking. And, they ended up being punts, as opposed to straight turnovers. But I didn't think that game plan made a lot of sense. And obviously, Emmett Johnson, the kid who earlier in the week, he's from Minnesota, right? And you can tell he's still a little perturbed that he wasn't pursued more heavily by the Gophers, and he had said, this was his revenge game. 14 carries for 63 yards really wasn't a factor. Like you mentioned, that put all the pressure on Raiola, particularly when the boulder starts rolling downhill late third quarter into the fourth quarter, and now they have to throw. That kid was in a shark tank with nowhere to go. Those deep drops, you had our boy Agent Zero with the 2.5 sacks. You had Mentz with the 2.5 sacks. You had Jackson Howard. Hats off to Jackson Howard. 2 sacks for Jackson Howard. Devin Eastern, he got to get in on the fun. He had another sack. And then Matt Kingsbury had one too. But yeah, that tough scenario for Nebraska. I don't know that their coaches were looking as deep into the analytics and as deep into the game film for the Gophers coming into a game that was on a short week anyway, as perhaps they otherwise might have if they weren't being asked about all week. Is Matt Rule going to Penn State? And maybe coaches thinking about their future as well. So the Gophers took perfect advantage of what turned out to be a really good spot and just absolutely hammered Nebraska.
Housekeeping for me, that big sack that I was talking about was the aforementioned Matt Kingsbury, who blew up the kid who wished he was recruited more by the state of Minnesota. By the way, I'm not saying that to poke fun at him. He just happened to be the kid that got absolutely trucked and almost sacked his own quarterback by being trucked back into Raiola. My one thought on Patrick Mahomes Jr., even though he claims he's not, everything is virtually the same. I still don't quite know what to make of him. I know you said he's going to get drafted. I do believe that he will. It's all the classic scout stuff, right? He's got the body. He's got the arm. He appears to be a tough kid. He took a beating. I think he came into the game hobbled. He looked hobbled out of the gate, and then the Gophers just kept beating him up. But he does love to make, he had the splashy play, falling down, flipping it forward. Okay, it was a 9-yard gain, could have easily also have been picked off. Now it wasn't, but it could have been picked off. He does have a tendency still, though, just to do some hero ball that I think you can maybe get away with in college against some teams in the Big Ten. And I know this isn't a Nebraska podcast, but I'm not as high on him as others. That doesn't mean that he can't become a better player or that he won't. But right now, through the first year and a half of seeing him play, Thor, I'm just a little underwhelmed from what I was sold on him.
Yeah, it's a kid who the best parts of his game, it's out of structure play, the creativity, and then the arm with it. It's not a guy right now that's as effective with the things that people at home, when you're watching the game, that you see as more of the easy stuff, which is the in structure type concepts, following the playbook as the play concept as designed on time. And getting the ball out a little quicker, right? I mean, Raiola's a kid that likes to be out on, the high wire act a little bit, and that was the book on Mahomes, to be fair, early on in Lubbock at Texas Tech. And Mahomes improved a bit at it his last year out of there. But that, again, that was still the question during his pre-draft process, was the in-structure stuff. And I suppose this would be the Nebraska coaching staff's response to the thing that I just said about why wasn't there more quick hitting concept? They might just be like, Raiola's not good at that stuff, but that would go into what you're talking about, Ross. If with that stuff, is he as efficient? With the timing game, if you need him to be there with the quick game, we haven't seen as much of that. We know that there's potential special ability outside of structure, and the arm talent. It speaks for itself, but Raiola, this is something that Mahomes learned early in the NFL. Mahomes, the first year that he started, which was his second year in the NFL, you look back at the stats, he was getting a ton of explosive plays that year. And then after that, the NFL was like, Pat, you're not getting the explosives on us anymore. So they just started playing the too high. That's when Mahomes, it had to become more the paper cut stuff, right? And Pat Mahomes has gotten, of course, incredible at in-structure type plays and the timing and getting it on the guy's hands, leading him into space if you can, off a quick concept right after the snap. And that's something that Raiola is absolutely going to have to work on if he hopes to be a first-round pick and if he hopes to have a long career in the NFL as a starter.
Big deal or not a big deal in your mind? I think for where I'm at, it's a little tough to gauge in today's day and age of college football, but PJ Fleck picked up his 7th win over a top 25 team. Nebraska in the top 25 came in at number 25. That's his 7th win over a top 25 team at the University of Minnesota. That is the most at the University of Minnesota for any head football coach. I lean towards big deal. I don't really know what that means because I don't feel like the Gophers have been, they're such a bad program that every one of those 7 wins is shocking. But I lean towards it's a big deal because it goes back to something I think you and I talked about on the last podcast. If it wasn't the last, it was before that, was the ceiling for the program has been elevated. And yes, I get he's been here for basically a decade now. But to be able to beat some of those schools at home, on the road, brand name, not a brand name when they're in the top 25, I tend to believe that is a pretty big deal.
I think it's a big deal, yes, and I think it's another strong data point to that discussion we had last week, where PJ Fleck is the best coach that the Gophers have had in 75 years. He ain't the best coach in program history, but it has been a long time since there's a guy where you can discuss with him. I think it's pretty objective when you look at the last 75 years, and we got a lot of data on that at this point. That's just another data point that underlines PJ Fleck is the best coach that here in the past 75 years. Did
the win over Nebraska change your season expectations? I For me, I would say slightly. I think I told you at the beginning of the year, if I had to guess, I'm pretty positive I said 6-6, 7-5, but I would go with 7-5. I would say at the moment, and I think largely depending on how it plays out, Thor, I'd be okay with it. I would say the minimum now is probably 7-5, but 8-4 is there for the taking if you start thinking about, okay, you host Michigan State, not a guaranteed win, but you're at home. You should win that game. Wisconsin's as down as they've ever been. Who knows who the coach is at that point? Not a guaranteed win, but you probably should win that. Well, that gets you to 7 right there. Do you beat Northwestern? Do you maybe go to Kinnick this weekend and beat Iowa again for the second time in 3 years? So I don't know if upping my win projection by 1 game from 7 to 8 dramatically changes the expectation. But as the season's gone on, just because of being 5-2, 7 games in, and say what you want about 2 of the wins over Rutgers or Purdue, the fact is this is a 3-1 team that right now is in the top half of the Big Ten. So, and factor in, Thor, we've talked about this, PJ Fleck teams tend to get better as the season goes on. I don't think my expectations have changed a ton, but I guess my win projection has changed slightly. I now believe at the end of the year, this is probably a team that we should look back on and say 8-4, nice season.
100%. Yeah. Both the floor and the ceiling for this season rose just a bit with that win against Nebraska. You know,
did it rose or did it rose?
Oh, I like that, Ross. Yeah. They both go up. You know, for my full-time job, analytics is a big part of it. And when, you're sort of gauging, just a little aside here. But in the preseason, how do I come up with my opinions against the Vegas totals? Well, I have a system that will project the point spread for all 12 games for each FBS team. I can convert those projected spreads into win expectancies, right? Then it becomes easy. You just add up sort of the win expectancies, right? Well, as you go along during the season and you get results that get slotted in for the win expectancy, that changes, of course, the projected win total, right? As you go along. This game coming in, you were in the 30s for win expectancy. Not only did you turn a 30% win expectancy into, in the ledger, 100% of a win, you also again raising sort of the tide of the way that you're perceived, your analytics, etc. You're also now, the games going forward, you're going to be either favored by a little bit more or underdog by a little bit less. Your win expectancies in those games have risen a little bit. The win against Nebraska, you look at this thing just from an analytical perspective, it literally rose them a full win in the projections, right? Which, makes it, you flip the game or whatever, but the extra 30% there or whatever that would be, that, with their pre-game projection of the 30% win expectancy or a little bit above that, that's been made up by the added win expectancies for the games left on the schedule. Right. And so now, I was looking at this right before we got on the record. The literally the projections, you look at I'm looking at SP Plus in this one, but they got the Gophers 26% win probability at Iowa, 77 against Michigan State, et cetera. The last game, 79% at home against Wisconsin. But you add their record to the win expectancies at this point, they're now at around 7.5. Right. We were talking in advance of this. The Gophers had been tracking right with their Vegas win expectancy up until Friday. Every single week it was like 6.6, 6.3, 6.8, 6.2. But it was always kind of right around there. They have now catapulted into from off the 6.5 number. Now you're at the 7.5 number. So as before, people, how do you think the Gophers will finish? Answer was always 6-6 or 7-5, right? Now I believe that has changed to 7-5 or 8-4. That's just courtesy of the Nebraska game. It makes the season more interesting. It puts you in a category, a neighborhood of potentially now we can start dreaming of better bowl games as well. And if you can pull off an upset, maybe you start thinking about maybe this is a better season than we thought it could be. But yeah, it raised the tide of this season by a full win.
If you're thinking upset, I would classify going to Kinnick and winning as an upset. You mentioned the 76% chance that Iowa has. I think last time I checked over the weekend, that's what the ESPN projection was going with as well, about 75% for Iowa. So I got a couple things I'll throw out to you and everybody watching and listening when it comes to Iowa. Kinnick is an incredibly tough place to play. Just ask PJ Fleck. He has his lone win against Iowa, however, did come there. So maybe you got that going in your favor. Drake Lindsay at this point, and this is where I feel like the Gophers are up against it on Saturday. I do believe that, but I do believe they can surprise and they can win the game. But why do I say they're up against it? A, it's a tough place to play. B, the only data I can really look at comes from your 2 road games. Now, I get it. One was against Ohio State. I understand that. But he and the offense hasn't exactly been world beaters at Cal and at Ohio State. And I would argue Kinnick can be every bit as tough, if not tougher, to play at than the Horseshoe, just because of the way the stadium is positioned and how loud the crowd can be. But on the positive side, Thor, and I'm not saying that this means that Iowa is not a good football team, because I believe they are pretty good. I think their offense is much better than it used to be, which is good because it's offsetting a defense that has gotten better as the season's gone on, but definitely gives you more than a typical Kirk Ferentz-led team does. But Iowa's opponents so far in the Big Ten this year are combined 0-12. So again, I'm not saying that means Iowa's a fraud and that they won't beat the Gophers and that they, quite honestly, might not beat them by 10, 14 points. I'm not saying that, but I'm really interested to see how the game shakes out, and what it looks like at 6 o'clock on Saturday, because I do believe, I don't think the Gophers defense is going to look that good again. I don't believe they'll look that good. So the 3 things I'm looking for is how will Drake Lindsay play on the road, and not just him, the offense. They've looked more discombobulated at Cal and Ohio State. Kinnick is a very tough place to play. And let me just clarify what I just said. Iowa's Big Ten wins have come against teams that are a combined 0-12. So could this game possibly be there for the taking if the Gophers can replicate, maybe not to the degree that they dominated Nebraska, but can you take a good portion of that on the road and take on Iowa? Maybe. I think that 0-12 part gives me a little bit of hope.
They got a puncher's chance. The Gophers do. The Hawkeyes are favorites. They're justifiable favorites. But there is a path here. The biggest thing, and it kind of goes back to what a thing that I talked about last week heading into the Nebraska game. Although it didn't, funny enough, it didn't end up coming to the fore. Remember when we were talking about the Gophers' issues with tackling? And sort of letting fish off the hook in the Nebraska game, because of Nebraska's deep drop ethos, especially as we went along there in the second half. It didn't come to the fore as much. The Gophers were much less having to tackle an athlete one-on-one in space as they were just pinning their ears back and turning Dylan Raiola into a crash test dummy. This game is going to be the polar opposite. The Iowa Hawkeyes love to grab you by the wrist, bring you into a phone booth, and then we're doing rock'em sock'em until one of us walks out of here, right? And so you do not have a choice but, to buckle up that chin strap and make tackles, be it in space or, a lot of, obviously, between the tackle concepts, guys that maybe aren't quite as athletic, but the grinder types, and behind a really good offensive line that Iowa has. Jennings Dunker's been incredible there. He's a guy we're going to be talking about for the NFL draft. Logan Jones as well. But one thing to keep an eye on here, Iowa, I'll just give you the scouting report. I obviously watch a lot of Iowa football. Haven't gone to grad school there. Probably a team I know the best in the nation. Their quarterback, Mark Gronowski, they get him from South Dakota State. He was a FCS Player of the Year a couple years ago. It's a little bit misleading, though, because you think about him as a quarterback. The guy's not great in the pocket. I'll just put it there straight for you. The arm is decent. The problem is Mark Gronowski reads the field from the pocket like he's underwater, is how I see it. He does not have a ton of pocket presence. He is not very good reading the field, going across progressions. He gets stuck on them. If you give him the first progression open, he can generally make that throw. You have to take shots with him sporadically. You can't have him trying to read across the field and then throw it. That's why they don't do it. What Mark Gronowski is great at, though, he is a big load that loves to run. Tough kid. My joke that I've made about him is my comp for Mark Gronowski is Peyton Hillis if he was playing quarterback. It's a 6'2", 240-pound sledgehammer and he is a huge part of their run game, and that's what it is with Iowa. They have the awesome offensive line. They have the downhill. They have the zone running, across the thing. But the north-south runners in that, and then you have Gronowski, the ability to pull the ball back, go around the end. You have some of the RPO concepts in there, and then you have other subterfuge that has to do with Gronowski running the ball. But the Gophers' defensive strength of both the pass rush against taking away the deep drop, the deep throws down the field. Iowa doesn't really do that stuff as much. They're not going to strand Gronowski in the pocket unless you force them by getting a double-digit lead in the second half, and that would be the one stunning outcome in this game if the Gophers are just running away with it in the second half. This thing's going to be a rock fight. That's what Iowa wants to turn it into. The Gophers have the defensive front, as we've seen, to disrupt the running game, right? I mean, and that's what you got to do here with Iowa in this rock fight. The Gophers, they remain number 2 in the country in yards before contact per attempt. They still struggle in the yards after contact per attempt because of some of those issues. I think their tackle success rate right now is in the 90s in the FBS out of 136 teams. The Gophers, you're going to have to play physical. You're going to have to keep your gap integrity here against this zone running scheme. The Hawkeyes have running backs with good vision, but the Hawkeyes do not have your singular superstar running back like they did last year with Caleb Johnson. This year, it's spread between Gronowski, the sledgehammer, and then the runners. It's not a super dynamic offense. It's not going to do much through the air. It's going to be short stuff. It's going to be timing concepts that are just given to him coming off the run game. Can the Gophers tackle well? That's going to be a huge thing. And then obviously a lot's going to come back to Drake Lindsey on the other side. The Hawkeyes with Phil Parker, their defensive coordinator, they play zone coverage at one of the highest propensities in the FBS. I'm talking going back the last decade. When we talk about Gopher back-end defenders in the NFL draft process, the one problematic thing with it is always you have to give the caveat, we did not see this kid in man coverage very much. But Phil Parker's extremely creative with the zone looks that he will give quarterbacks. The thing he is good is, pre-snap, it looks like we're going to do this. We'll change the picture a little bit. But it is heavy zone leaning. So they're going to try to bait Drake Lindsey into different stuff. They're going to try to take away some stuff that he likes to do. But Drake Lindsey's going to have to stand back there tall and brave in the pocket. And he's going to have to wait out throwing windows, right? Like, one criticism about this is an aside, but it goes to my point. One criticism about PFF, their grading, there's many, but one of them has to do with charting whether a receiver is open. And there's been points made about against zone coverage. It's not that a receiver can be open or covered. It's that depending on the timing of the play, the snapshot, he's running himself open. Now he's run himself covered because you have the defenders are more or less staying static with where they are, right? Drake Lindsey needs to wait out those windows. You do have windows and open available opportunities against that Iowa defense, but it's one of those things where you got to be patient, then sudden, right? You have to make those correct decisions. The Hawkeyes do not give up explosive plays. It's the thing that they take away. You have to paper cut them down the field. This is a tough task for a redshirt freshman quarterback going there because you're going to have to, again, you're going to have to paper cut them the whole time. And one mistake, it's going to come back and haunt you. But there is an opportunity here. There's a path for the Gophers to move the ball a little bit on offense. You still have to play conservative. You can't go YOLO, right? But try to keep with the pace and the tempo of the game with that. Be comfortable throwing the ball away or even taking a sack, punting it, depending on in deference to taking shots downfield, unnecessary risks like that. But I do think there's a couple different paths for the game planning of the Gophers here to potentially have some success at Iowa.
Well, if you do punt the ball, Dinkytown's Tory Taylor he'll have to return to form because
I don't even want to talk about punt returning with the Minnesota game in Kinnick Stadium. I still, anyway, the fair catch with Cooper, obviously, but the fair catch that was or wasn't, depending on what side you were.
It's been 2 years now, so we'll leave the fair catch where it is. Well, I'm just saying Tom Weston will have to put more inside the 10.
Dinkytown Tory Taylor, baby.
Dinkytown Tory Taylor was putting too many at the 15 on Friday. I would have liked to see those at the 5 or 10. On Gronowski, one thing going back now 2 weeks to the Purdue game, one thing I thought the Gophers were doing wrong most of the game was they were blitzing up the middle at, I think it's Nathan Brown, right, for Purdue. They were blitzing up the middle at
the quarterback. Yeah, Ryan Brown. Yeah,
Ryan Brown. Thank you. They were blitzing up the middle, and he was fairly elusive and could do some things. So they were coming up the middle, forcing him outside of the pocket, and that's where the Gophers were beating him. If I'm blitzing Gronowski, I want to do it from the corners. I want to come from the outside in, not the inside out. That would be, in my mind, the way to get him. Now, the best way is to rush 4, get home rushing 4 and dropping 7. But if you're going to bring an extra man or two, I'm interested to see where Danny Collins is going to bring them from, because I do think, to your point, Thor, if you rush him up the middle and you don't get him, he's going to get outside the pocket and make you look bad. So I would rather bring those extra men from the outside, force him to stay in the pocket. And look, if he finds an open receiver downfield, great, tip your hat to him. But that's the way I would try and blitz him.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about that defensive strategy there. The game. So I went to the Cyhawk game in September, Iowa at Iowa State. Iowa State had a fascinating strategy against Mark Gronowski that ended up working very well to great effect, and Iowa State ended up winning that game. It was a little bit unorthodox for a pass defense when you think about it, but like it was devastating, the practicality of it. What they did against Gronowski was they only rushed 3 most of the game. Like, you can go back and watch the tape or watch the metrics. Most of the time it was rushing 3, dropping 8, but they had 2 spy linebackers on Gronowski the whole time. Right. And so those guys, you can address some of this stuff intermediate and in the flat with your responsibilities of spying Gronowski, right? Like, Gronowski starts moving right outside the pocket. Like, the dude on the right's, he's moving right with him. And the other spy, he had his responsibility. He's straying a little bit over, as well. Gronowski goes to the left, right? Like, they were not going to allow Gronowski to leave the pocket. And the other ethos of that is, we're taking away your first read, right? Like, Iowa does not have many good receivers, especially now their top pass catching tight end as well is out for this season. And they don't have a lot of talent at wide receiver. So if you can take away his first read, and then you say, we're going to take away your first read, we're not going to let you run. The hilarious thing about that game, or the opposite of hilarious if you were a Hawkeye fan, is what it would lead to. You'd see Gronowski with his first read, and he's like, oh, crap, that guy ain't there. Then, it takes him so long to get, where's the second guy? Where's the second guy? Da-da-da-da-da. And then, okay, now he's covered as well. Then Gronowski, he always wants to run after his second read isn't there. But he just kept seeing, like, take a step forward. Oh, crap, that dude's right on me. Go that way. Crap, he's on me. Now he's like, I got to find another guy. Gronowski, he's not a pro-level thrower. Like, I'm sorry. Like, he's just not. He has the physical ability. He reminds me, this would be a blast from the past. You didn't have to be a real college football sicko to follow me with this one, but he reminds me of an Oklahoma quarterback when I was an undergrad at Kansas, named Blake Bell. They called him the Belldozer. He was huge. He was crazy athletic, and he was fun in that regard, but he did not have pro-caliber throwing ability. Right. And a part of it was issues reading the field. And so you just become that sledgehammer. But it is interesting. I think I would go with the Iowa strategy on this. Just make sure that you force Gronowski to stay in the pocket. It doesn't matter how much time you give him to go across the field. If he's back there for 5 seconds, Iowa is susceptible to Mark Gronowski making a mistake that could flip the field. And they don't want him to do that. Right. So a lot of times you're going to end with, he's going to have to throw it away, or he's going to attempt to run anyway, and you have him penned in, so he'll get a yard or two, or maybe you get him for a yard or 2 loss. But that's what I would do. Flood his passing zone so he can't go to his first read for sure, and then spy him.
Tougher places to play in the Big Ten than Kinnick. There's not many. I alluded to maybe the horseshoe because of volume. I'm going to eliminate the Big House right away. I've been there a couple times. Big House is awesome. It's not all that loud, partially because of the way that it's set up. Autzen Stadium, can you say that for sure? Maybe for sure. But what other ones come to mind for you, or are there any other ones? Happy Valley when it's rocking, but there's not many. It is a really difficult place to play. The benefit that the University of Minnesota has, even in today's day and age with NIL and transfer portal, you get to go there every other year. So if you've played there at least one time, it's not as shocking as if you're a freshman or you just transferred in and it's your first time. But it is it's a fun place to go, even as an opposing fan, just because it is a cool environment. But it's a tough place to play.
It's definitely a tough place to play. The other ones that Penn State for sure. Game that James Franklin gets fired, notwithstanding, but generally those whiteout games on Saturday nights, very, very difficult to beat them there. And the other one that I would toss out that's more like a dark horse, but I think it deserves to be in the top 5 of this discussion is Washington. You play out there on the lake and you have some wind whipping around and the fans are kind of on top of you. It's always been a place that has been described as a really tough environment, and Washington's pulled off some big upsets in the past at home. But Kinnick Stadium, tough place to play. And we've seen that over the years. But it's certainly not unwinnable, as the Gophers know from 2 years ago.
Who's our Thorfer? Which Gopher in the pros stood out over this past weekend in the NFL? Could be Sunday, could be Monday. Heck, it could even have been last Thursday. Who do we got?
So this week it's first of all, I got to shout out. We had Gopher on Gopher Crime, which always Boye Mafe beat Ursery last week, and he had a strip sack. But then the play was nullified by a Seattle penalty, which may be why some people didn't catch that one. But neither of those guys. Thorfer for this week, Tyler Johnson. We all love Tyler Johnson. Tyler Johnson right now, exemplary hanging around the NFL. But unfortunately for him, he has found himself in one of the worst passing environments we see in the NFL last 5 or 6 years, playing with Justin Fields, who I could not. Did you see the thing with Woody Johnson, the Jets owner, in the hotel lobby yesterday that was playing?
Yes. Yes, I did.
I have never heard an owner just be that dismissive about his active starting QB1 inside of a season. Like, that was Woody Johnson seemed to be saying, y'all ain't going to see Justin Fields again. I hate that. It's like, but anyway, irregardless, Tyler Johnson, he only plays 15 snaps in the last game, but ends up 3 catches on 3 targets for 60 yards. And that passing environment that he was in, that was an incredible performance. So Tyler Johnson, hats off to you, sir. You are the Thorfer for the week.
While we're talking about things from the interweb, did you see the bar stool with the Jets fan after the game? Have you seen the kid who's probably, 15, 16, and they ask him for his thoughts on the game, and he just has this blank look on his face, and he just goes, I hate this team. I was born into this. I'll never not be a Jets fan, but I hate this team.
I didn't see that, but yeah, I sympathize with his frustration for sure.
That is our Thorfer. Let's take a quick look around college football. More impressive win from over this last weekend. Georgia coming back on Ole Miss, or Alabama just dismantling Tennessee, largely from basically the last play of the second half on. Also nice wins for Notre Dame, Vandy, BYU in the Holy War. It truly was a delicious college football Saturday this past weekend.
Was. Yeah, it sure was. I'm going to say Alabama because, like you said, they just controlled that one from the get with Tennessee. It seemed kind of like that game was over at halftime. Ty Simpson is still playing so well. They have their fleet of athletes there at Alabama. The receiving corps is just absolutely amazing. That team is legitimately dangerous. That one was the more impressive one for me. The Georgia game was notable, but, I'll say I think Georgia's fraudulent. Georgia, it's kind of hilarious. There's a stat, I might misquote it, but I think I'm pretty close. I believe it's 10 of their last, I'm talking about the Georgia Bulldogs, 10 of their last 11 games in the SEC, they have trailed at halftime. It's an incredible stat because they invariably end up winning these games. And I do a Saturday morning Twitter Spaces where we give out our picks, player props and bets on the sides and stuff. And my handicap on that game was bet Ole Miss in the first half and bet Georgia with the halftime line, just because that's the way that Georgia plays every game. And Georgia once again did the same thing. They were lethargic in the first half, and then they had to come back, and they did, and they end up winning that thing. But that Georgia team is deeply, deeply flawed. They have a great coaching staff, And so they will find stuff. They try to play rope-a-dope in the first half and just get more information. They're basically like a poor man's Floyd Mayweather as a college football team. They're keeping their hands up, and they're throwing very little punches, the first 3 rounds, like our boy Floyd. But then, they're just sort of calculating your movements, gauging everything, and then their coaches go in at halftime. They make all their adjustments, and they usually come out as a different team. But again, a very flawed team, and they're going to run into a couple trump card teams that are like, the second half adjustment stuff, that ain't going to work on us. And I think Georgia's going to get blown out a couple times this year as we go down. And I think they're going to get caught in a spot where they suffer like an enormous upset, like a stunning upset. So, and we can talk about spots for that as the fall goes along. But I believe in Alabama, notable win. I do not believe in Georgia. So that's how I split that one.
The next team I want to talk about, I do believe they're still probably not going to be bowl eligible if that's the mark here that we pay attention to. I think looking at their schedule, 5-6 wins looks to be difficult, but dare I say UCLA football's good? Are they better than we thought they were? Because they've now won 3 games in a row. What was it? Penn State. I got it in front of me here. Penn State, Michigan State, Maryland. Now they got to go to Bloomington. They get Nebraska. They're at Ohio State. They're at home against Washington, and they're at USC. So I think getting to 6-6 or better is still a very tough road. But when you look today, Thor, they're 3-1 in the Big Ten and in the upper half of the Big Ten. Did all that UCLA needed, was all that ails them just the head football coach?
Hard to make an argument otherwise. To the contrary,
it is.
Yeah, like you hate to kind of Deshaun Foster like pile on and stuff, but that was, just absolutely pathetic. The first 3 games, one of them you lost at UNLV by 7 points, and then the next game you lost by 25 at home against New Mexico. New Mexico currently ranked 90th in, 90th in SP plus. They were pathetic, and then coming out of the bye when you fire Foster. The funny thing about that is they almost beat Northwestern, right? That was they lost that game by 3, and then of course beat Penn State, beat Michigan State, beat Maryland the last one. The offense looks totally different, and now they're giving effort on defense. The program keeps highlighting Jerry Neuheisel, and it's a cool story and everything. Tim Skibber's the head coach there, but you wouldn't know it from the way that UCLA is presenting their coaches to the public. I wonder if some of that is Foster had throttled control of the offense in a way that obviously did not suit that team. Nico Iamaleava looks like a different quarterback ever since Deshaun Foster was escorted out of there with his boxes. And Jerry Neuheisel took over that offense, and you have now an offense that's at least interesting and it's at least frisky. And again, they're giving effort on defense again. Do I think this team is great? They're 68th SP plus right now, 73rd offense, 72nd defense. Some of those metrics obviously dragged down by the start of the season, whatever. Some of them maybe dragged up by the past 3 games when you didn't have as much tape. What's going to be interesting now is now that they do, you have sort of half your sample before with Foster. You have sort of half of it now. Is now that there's more tape on what Neuheisel and those guys are doing on offense. Are there going to be defensive adjustments, the other way that help clamp down on UCLA? But just to your question, Ross, about the story, I love it. I called UCLA America's team, like America's sort of like redheaded stepchild kind of team. Like they're just kind of like a fun, like they were given up on, it's like orphan, and like they make this one change and all of a sudden like they're just roaring back now, and they're a super fun team to watch, and the crowd there is really fun now. They've sort of re-energized things just by getting rid of Deshaun Foster. Kirk Cignetti this week at his podium session with the press, he's always pretty complimentary to opponents early on in the week, but I actually agreed with when they were talking about like he was saying this UCLA they're 3-0. It's an undefeated team, right? Like he was making the point to the media. It is not instructive to think about UCLA as the team that you saw the first 3 games because it's so different now. And we'll see if they can end up rallying to bowl season, being at 3-4 now. And obviously they might not be favored in another game. So you're going to have to pull off some upsets, and I don't see one coming against Indiana. But can you beat Nebraska at home? Can you beat Washington at home to give yourself a shot in the finale traveling across town to USC? in a fun game where if you could upset your arch rival and pull them down from a better bowl game, then you would get into bowl season. That's kind of what we're hoping for. But yeah, UCLA, fun story.
So we've talked about Rick Neuheisel a little bit because genetics are a crazy thing. Jerry Neuheisel looks just like Rick Neuheisel. You'll fill in the name here, but shout out to Chris Mortensen's kid who got a nice win over a top 25 team in his first game as a head football coach for UAB. He also looks just like his father. I get it. That's what genetics do. But man, as somebody who kind of looks like their father, it's incredible when you see people who are dead ringers for their old men. So shout out to Chris Mortensen's kid, who I'm blanking on his name.
Alex, Alex Morton. Yeah, at UAB. And another situation there where it was clearly tired with the old coach. The Trent Dilfer shtick got old. I mean, almost right after he got hired. And we all thought he should have been fired over the offseason or late in the last regular season, more to the point. But because of the financial commitment and UAB obviously not having the resources, some of these P4 schools, they had made a legitimate commitment to Dilfer. We still don't know why. They have Brian Vincent was the interim coach after Bill Clark. Bill Clark was the guy that had ushered that program out of when they disbanded their football program. Remember that, like 8 years ago, whatever. Bill Clark was the guy who took it over, brought them back. All of a sudden, now UAB was solid again, and then he retires because of a health thing. It was like 3 years ago, right before the season, and Brian Vincent brought them UAB to a bowl game that year as the interim. But for whatever reason, their athletic department decided, nah, Brian Vincent ain't good enough. Let's pull Trent Dilfer off the ESPN set. It ended up disastrously, whereas Brian Vincent's turned out to be a pretty solid coach at UL Monroe, one of the hardest places in the country to win at. So I would think that the UAB job this offseason, it likely will come down to, can Alex Mortensen win enough to reinvigorate the fan base and make an argument that he deserves to have the interim tag removed from him, against, do we go and apologize to Brian Vincent and beg? Another one you could do is you could call Bill Clark and be like, Bill, are you sure you want to come back? Like Bill Schneider, that worked with Kansas State back in the day when Ron Prince didn't work out. I was like, Bill, please, please, please. And Bill Schneider came back. Bill Clark, that would be fun. But I would imagine that those are the top 3 candidates on UAB's list right now.
Typically at this point in the show, I would say let's take a look around college football, take a look at some games this week. And there's some good games. I mean, Oklahoma and Ole Miss could be fun, Missouri and Vandy. There's definitely some games worth noting. But I think one thing I'll just hop to in closing, give me a few players this year, Thor. You're our draft expert for Purple Daily. By the way, one of our draft experts for Purple Daily. This is the pregame show for Thor's Day at Purple Daily. Why don't you give me a couple of kids, Thor, that have rose either to your awareness or just in your rankings? And I'm not even talking about, these don't have to be kids that you thought were first round picks that are now top 5 picks. Just kids that the rest of America should be paying attention to because they're going to be playing for their favorite football team on Sundays.
You have a position you want to toss out? Because we it could do anyone.
Well, offensive line and defensive line tends to bore people. So how about receiver, quarterback, and why don't you give me a cornerback or a safety?
Yeah, risers for receiver. I would say the biggest one right now, Chris Brazell from Tennessee, was a kid who started his career at Tulane, 6'5", 210. Very, very good athlete, and he's been very good down the field. Earlier in his career, we saw flashes of that at Tulane, but he had some off-the-field type things. He went to Tennessee. In early August, there was a thing where he was driving with a suspended license, and there was no guarantee he was even going to be on the active roster this fall. Like, it was like all up in the air. He sorted that out, and he's come out this fall and been absolutely incredible. It's by far the best we've ever seen Chris Brazell dominating down the field. He was the guy the weekend that they faced Georgia where he was all over ESPN, Brazell, because they just kept throwing him lollipops down the field. And this kid is 6'5" with these long stretch Armstrong arms. And Georgia had guys one-on-one deep with him. And so Brazell's like, okay, no problem. Just like he's playing above the rim and these guys can't get up there with him. Brazell's really interesting for the next level. The comp I have on him right now is Martavis Bryant, for folks who remember him. Pure downfield, field stretcher. You have to play a high safety on my side, which also helps the rest of the offense get their spacing. So he would be a riser, I would say, for receiver. Running back, I would toss out 2 names. Justice Haynes from Michigan would be the biggest one. I actually have him. Justice Haynes is a top 3 running back for me right now. He was a rotational back at Alabama the last 2 years. Had talent. I get some of the information from the NFL scouting services, and the preseason there was an estimated 4.3, 5.40 on Justice Haynes, even though he weighs 210 pounds. So you have sort of like this sort of mini bowling ball type build, but you have home run speed. And he has shown both between the tackles efficiency, but also the ability to rip off explosive runs this year while he has gotten bell cow workload at Michigan, right? He left Alabama to go to another blue blood where now a bell cow job is open, and he's been utterly awesome with it. So he's soared up the boards. Like I said, top 3 running back for me. I think he goes on day 2, potentially round 2, depending on the way the regular season ends. Jadarian Price, the other running back I toss out, he is the teammate of Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame. And because of that, he's been a little bit overshadowed, in his career. Jeremiah Love, this coming class, he's like the Bijan Robinson or the Ashton Genty of the coming class. And Price has always been the guy behind him. Price also doesn't get used on passing downs, even though he's like 205 pounds. And it's super duper shifty is Jadarian Price. And his skill set, like from the treetops, you would think this is a receiving back, but Notre Dame has used Jeremiah Love, and then before this guy Anais Williams doing that. So we haven't seen as much of that, but Jadarian Price, extremely shifty. He's extremely difficult to get hands on, right? He's one of those guys who can sort of, now you see him, now he teleports out and he's in open grass, so he can get out of danger real quick, and now all of a sudden the defense is in danger. He's shown explosivity this year, more yards per carry than Jeremiah Love, more yards after contact this year than Jeremiah Love, and a higher elusive rating this year than Jeremiah Love. Still hasn't done the pass work stuff, so that's sort of the question with Price. But because of all this stuff, I have moved Price into my top 5 running backs. Quarterbacks, I would toss out 2 names. Dante Moore from Oregon, the game he had against Penn State, caused a big jump up. He had the struggles a little bit against Indiana. So that one, we'll see. But Dante Moore was a 5-star recruit, came out, signed with Chip Kelly at UCLA. Funny enough, we were just talking about UCLA. Chip Kelly, his last season there, he was like, Dante, you're getting the job. And Dante Moore was not ready to start that year. And that's, Chip Kelly then leaves. He goes to become the Ohio State offensive coordinator, obviously, then goes on to the Raiders. And Dante Moore went on his way. Last year was the backup to Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, and he's assumed that job now. We'll see with Dante Moore. He's a true, this is his 3rd year in college, so he absolutely could come back. But if Dante Moore in Oregon, they're strong down the stretch, they're running the college football playoff, that's a kid that could go in the first round. And then the other one was mentioned in Ty Simpson before. Ty Simpson from Alabama. I didn't believe in Ty Simpson. I'd seen Ty Simpson in the past, and they tried to give him the job a couple times before. And then the first game this year, he struggles against Florida State. The whole team did. But, with Ty Simpson, I was always like, it's sort of like an average frame and, average athleticism, maybe a little bit less, average arm. I didn't really get it. But, as time after the Florida State game, you're starting to see it now. He's not like a Lamar Jackson as an athlete, but he makes people miss in the pocket. He extends plays and he can throw on the run. And then as far as like the others, does he have the best arm in the world? No, but he reads the field very, very well. And he also is really good mechanically. His mechanics might be some of the best in the nation. Like the whole thing of the feet, the eyes following the feet, right? Like he makes these really just almost violent, when he's on one side of the field, he'll violently change his throwing platform to the other side if the second read's on the other side. It's a guy who it's bang, 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 bang with his progressions. And because of that, he's always in the right position to throw to the progression that he's then gone to. And the thing that plays up his lack of natural arm strength is his mechanics and his ability to use his entire body. It's a kid who's using his lower half every single time to generate more velocity. It does some of the heavy lifting for him. So because of his brains, because of not playing outside of himself, he's always playing within himself. And because of clearly he spent a lot of time in the film room, and I think he spent a lot of time there with Kalen DeBoer the last couple of years. Kalen DeBoer, the last quarterback, before Jalen Milroe, he was forced into Jalen Milroe his first year at Alabama, but folks out there recall Kalen DeBoer was the guy who found Michael Penix and developed him beginning at Indiana, and then they had 2 years apart, I believe, in the middle. But then DeBoer again at the last 2 years with Washington, when Michael Penix established himself as a first round pick. That was all Kalen DeBoer. This is Kalen DeBoer's newest developmental project in Ty Simpson, and Ty Simpson's looking like a first round pick right now, and that's what makes Alabama dangerous down the stretch here this season. So that'd be the other one I toss out.
The draft is only 6 months away, Thor. It's right around the corner.
Right around the corner, baby.
Holiday season for the NFL. I'll leave you with this, Thor, completely off topic, but I saw over the weekend, welcome back to bowl eligibility, the University of Hawaii, who will more than likely play in the Hawaii Bowl because they almost always do. But congrats to our guy, Timmy Chang, leading the Hawaii. I think our Rainbow Warriors back. I think we're back calling them the Rainbow Warriors. They are back, and they are bowl eligibility, or they are bowl eligible. Bowl eligibility. Wow, I've really had trouble talking. I think that means it's a good time to wrap it up. That's Thor Nystrom. This is the official pregame show to Purple Daily's Thursday. I'm Ross Brendel. Thank you so much for watching and listening to Gophers 101. Thor and I will be back next week recapping Iowa and Minnesota and talking about other things Gopher football related.